Hello, we welcome you to this Bible study of the Banking Blessings Ministry. My name is Goodluck Ofemo, and this is my wife.
Welcome to today's Bible study.
We welcome you to this study on our continued study on the life of David from the time he was anointed king of Israel through the time that he was actually made king of Israel. Today we look at an event that occurred between him and his followers as they returned from a battle against the Amalekites. They had what appeared to be problem with sharing battle proceeds, and David made a ruling that today forms the foundation for basic civil rights. So we are going to look at the circumstances of this ruling, see how it relates to civil rights, and use it to recall our previous study on civil rights. Only do you have something to say? Okay, we are going to go right through it. It's about David proclaiming a basic civil rights principle, and it has to do with trying to settle a developing dispute among his followers. They had pursued Amalekites that raided their base and took their families captive and captured took a lot of plunder from their camp and burnt their camp, their base. They caught up with them, defeated them in a fierce battle, recovered everything they took, and then on their way back, and of course they took plunder, they took whatever they had, the raiders had. When they returned, some of the followers of David were not happy with sharing the battle proceeds with those that did not join them in the battle. And David used this opportunity to proclaim a basic principle of civil rights. He started by recognizing their battle proceeds as what he described as what the Lord has given us. This is exactly the way it appears in the Bible. He described the battle proceeds as what the Lord had given us and said that every person will share alike from what the Lord has given us. And we're going to look at that because when we look at all the potential battles that we can fight, and so many ways in which what the Lord has given us can be interpreted, we'll see that this is really proclaiming equality of access to facilities of society, equality of access to things that society holds in common ownership for all members of the society. And we will find that this principle also or follows from the principle of equality under the law. You will remember that when God asked Saul to destroy the Amalekites, having passed judgment over them, Saul was expected to destroy everything there, everything that he encountered. Instead, he applied a personal criteria, saved things he considered good for different treatment later on, and then destroyed those things he considered bad. And God was not pleased and terminated his kingship because he was to execute the judgment equally against every person and thing among the Amalekites. Instead, he applied this he discriminated in how he applied it. So that violation of the principle of equality under the law resulted in God terminating him as king of Israel. The principle that David proclaimed, the principle of equal access to facilities of society, follows from the principle of equality under the law. And we're going to discuss that in a little bit more detail. But this forms the basic principle mandated by God to govern relationship between individuals and society, to define what society owes to individuals and what individuals owe to society. We are going to take our reading from 1 Samuel chapter 30, which describes David's interaction with his followers as they pursued and fought and defeated the Amalekites. So we start with what led to them pursuing the Amalekites. Remember, David and his followers had intended to go to battle with the Philistines, alongside the Philistines, a battle against Israel. But the Philistines rejected them and forced them to return to their base. When they got back to their base in Ziklag, they found that the base had been burnt and their possessions were taken. Whatever was not taken was burnt, and their families were carried off. So David inquired of God and decided to, and God advised him, God directed him to follow them, to go after them. And he did. On the way, he had 600 men at that time, but on the way, 200 of them became too weak to continue, too tired. And he had them stop, in fact, assigned them tasks at the base, and then with the other 400, he continued, pursued the Amalekites. But this separation into two groups is important because it is the separation that led to the dispute that almost occurred later on. And it was that dispute that gave David the opportunity to make the ruling that today forms the basis for civil rights. But let us read the background from 1 Samuel chapter 30, verses 3 to 10.
First Samuel chapter 30, reading from the NIV, verse 3. When David and his men reached Ziklag, they found it destroyed by fire, and their wives and sons and daughters taken captive. So David and his men wept aloud, until they had no strength left to weep. So, verse 5, David's two wives had been captured, Ahinoam of Jezreel and Abigail, the widow of Nabal of Carmel. David was greatly distressed because the men were talking of stoning him. Each one was bitter in spirit because of his sons and daughters. But David found strength in the Lord his God. Verse 7. Then David said to Abiathar the priest, the son of Ahimelech, bring me the ephod. Abiathar brought it to him. And David inquired of the Lord, shall I pursue this raiding party? Will I overtake them? Pursue them, he answered. You will certainly overtake them and succeed in the rescue. David and the 600 men with him came to the Besor Valley, where some stayed behind. 200 of them were too exhausted to cross the valley, but David and the other 400 continued the pursuit.
So David continued the pursuit with 400. Now, an incident occurred on the way that also shows the character of David and the training that he has given to his men. They encountered an Egyptian that was very weak, These are men under stress and focused on going to, pursuing people that had raided their base. So they could have carelessly beaten this man or just ignored him or something and continued. But they got him, they took him to David, and David ordered food for him, they fed him, revived him. It turned out the man was a servant of one of the Amalekites. And when he became too weak, they left him behind and continued. So after David and his men revived him, they made some agreement with him, and he took them to the raiders. So the point here was that even in distress, David was composed and compassionate. He composed because he recognized that the information he could get from this man was more important, was very important, and there was no point trying to maltreat the temporary, I don't know if I'll call it pleasure or what, of maltreating the man was not worth anything. But the information he could get from him was very important. And also he was compassionate. He recognized this man needed to be revived first. Yes, you need information, but for you to get anything out of him, he has to be strong enough. So they fed him, revived him, helped him regain his strength, and then negotiated with him, even though he was somewhat like a captive already. But they negotiated with him, and that bore fruit because he led them to the Amalekites. Let us read verses 11 to 16.
Verse 11 of 1 Samuel chapter 30. They found an Egyptian in a field and brought him to David. They gave him water to drink and food to eat. Part of a cake of pressed figs and 2 cakes of raisins. He ate and was revived, for he had not eaten any food or drunk any water for 3 days and 3 nights. David asked him, "Who do you belong to? Where do you come from?" He said, "I am an Egyptian, the slave of an Amalekite. My master abandoned me when I became ill 3 days ago. We raided the Negev of the Kerethites, some territory belonging to Judah, and the Negev of Caleb, and we burned Ziklag." David asked him, "Can you lead me down to this raiding party?" He answered, "Swear to me before God that you will not kill me or hand me over to my master, and I will take you down to them." He led David down, and there they were, scattered over the countryside, eating, drinking, and reveling because of the great amount of plunder they had taken from the land of the Philistines and from Judah.
Well, David and his men fought the raiders. The Bible describes the battle as lasting a whole day from dusk until the next evening, so dusk to dusk. So 24-hour battle. But the important thing is that David and his men defeated the Amalekites, killed them. Some of them escaped, but the rest were killed off. And then they recovered everything they had taken from Ziklag, and then took plunder of all their flocks and herds. Okay, that's leading us to the lesson of the Bible study. But let's read verses 17 to 20.
Verse 17. David fought them from dusk until the evening of the next day, and none of them got away except 400 young men who rode off on camels and fled. David recovered everything the Amalekites had taken, including his 2 wives. Nothing was missing, young or old, boy or girl, plunder or anything else they had taken. David brought everything back. He took all the flocks and herds, and his men drove them ahead of the other livestock, saying, "This is David's plunder."
Well, so this leads to the dispute, because when they got back to their base, some people among the 400 that went to battle disputed the sharing of the proceeds. They said that the 200 that were back, that stayed back at the base, that did not go to the battle with them, should not share in the proceeds, in the plunder. That these people, well, they can come and get their wives and children, but that's all they will get. They will not get any share of the plunder because they did not join in the battle. Let us read about this dispute from verses 21 and 22.
Verse 21. Then David came to the 200 men who had been too exhausted to follow him and who were left behind at the Besor valley. They came out to meet David and the men with him. As David and his men approached, he asked them how they were. But all the evil men and troublemakers among David's followers said, "Because they did not go out with us, we will not share with them the plunder we recovered. However, each man may take his wife and children and go."
Well, so that is the dispute, and this is what David had to deal with. And he rebuked them and said, "Look, you can't do that." And it was at that point that he described the plunder as what God has given us. And he said that every person will share in the plunder. Every person will share alike. We will read the exact words in the Bible. But by making this ruling, what he did was he recognized common ownership of the plunder. And today we're going to apply this, the common ownership to plunder. We're going to show how it applies to everything that we own in common, everything that society holds in common ownership. And we're going to enumerate all of these. Let's not peek into them. But you will see that though they include things that God has given to all, obviously we can name some of them, and we will see also that it includes products of society, effort and resources. And we are going to describe this because this comes directly, in fact, from looking at battle, because there it was a battle between David's group and the Amalekites. You can say battle between Israel and the Amalekites. David wasn't the king of Israel at that time. It was just a group of 600 people, but 400 of them in the battle. But in modern days, it's not just battle between two nations. We'll look at battle that nations fight on behalf of their people. And we're going to look at some of these, talk about these battles. But the proceeds of these battles, we'll see, can be likened to the plunder that David was making a ruling about. And about this plunder, he said, all will share alike, because that the share of those who stayed at the base, and those that went down to the battle, that all will share alike. We will read this first and then we'll talk about it more. 1 Samuel chapter 30 verses 23 to 25. The key words are really in verse 23, but we'll read 23 to 25.
Verse 23. David replied, "No, my brothers, you must not do that with what the Lord has given us. He has protected us and delivered into our hands the raiding party that came against us. Who will listen to what you say? The share of the man who stayed with the supplies is to be the same as that of him who went down to the battle. All will share alike."
Before we proceed, look at verse 23. There he talks about what the Lord has given us. Then he explained how they got to the plunder. He said God has protected us and protected them, delivered their enemies into their hands. In other words, they have won a victory, and God is responsible for this victory. The victory is really what God has given them, what God has given us. So the proceeds of the victory, in this case directly the plunder they took, but as we will see in other cases, the proceeds of the victory go far and wide. They define a lot of things that society holds in common ownership for the people. Anyway, so he made the direct ruling and said, who will listen to what you said? The share of the man, the share of those that stayed with the suppliers will be the same as the share of those that went down to battle. All will share alike. Okay, verse 25.
David made this a statute and ordinance for Israel from that day to this.
To this, the Bible says this. We will see that historically, I believe this statute is still valid in Israel. It's valid worldwide more than Israel, but we are going to see how. The statute really is all will share alike. And what are we sharing? What the Lord has given us. What the Lord has given us in this particular case has physical manifestation. That is, the plunder they have taken. But if you think of the type of battles that society might fight today, then all of these, we're going to list such battles later on, but all of these, the proceeds of these battles and all the things derived from them are what we call products of society effort and resources. It's battle against hunger, battle against poverty, battle against illiteracy, battle against underdevelopment, all sorts of battles that society may fight. There isn't, you could see that it's not only those in the front line of those battles participate in them. That society as a whole, through the principle of one body, many parts that Saul explained, in his gospel, not Saul, Paul wrote about in his gospel, that every member of society makes a contribution and society functions well because of all these contributions put together. So yes, in the case of David and his men, 400 of them went to battle, the other 200 stayed back and did other things. So the same way today, some people are at the front line of the battles that society fights. And many of them are not physical battles between countries, but battles that society wins, and then the victory that it wins defines something that people own in common, that members of the society own in common. And these form the society services, and they are often packaged, they are often packaged in terms of society services and programs. And what David's ruling means is that every member of society, every member of the society has a quality of access to these facilities, to these society services and programs. We call them facilities of society, but they include so many things. And this defines a basic principle of civil rights. Let's continue with the discussion. Civil rights is a basic right of every person because of being human. It's not dependent on what you do. It's not dependent on your contribution to society. It is simply something that society owes to you because you are a member of the society, because you are human. And these all flow from the principle of equality under the law that Saul violated, and because he violated it, God terminated him as king of Israel. Right there and then, to show that this is important, that equality under the law is important to him. Now, David, the principle that David enunciated follows from equality under the law. So we see that both equality under the law and the basic civil rights principle that David enunciated are part of God's mandate for relationship between individuals and society. It defines what society owes to individuals, and it defines individual responsibilities to society. In today's discussion, we have focused on what the basic thing that society owes to individuals. There are other aspects of civil rights or civil responsibilities that define individual responsibilities. We are not going to talk about those. We've actually done that in the past. Where civil rights becomes a problem, when it is particularly difficult for Christians, is when you are dealing with sinners, people that live in active sinful life. Now, we are not going to discuss this in detail because it's not possible. You can't take every case and analyze it. But there is a general principle that I think is applicable. One of the general principles is that you should let God judge the sinful life. It's God that decides what kind of punishment a sinner will receive for his sin. When and where and what and all that, that is really God's judgment. It's not for people to judge. Of course, people have responsibilities to others that they believe are living a sinful life. There are things you can do, pray for them, guide them, or in whichever way you can. But the second principle is that you should focus on your human responsibility of protecting the civil rights of all, including sinners. The civil rights of every individual, not just the sinners, but including the sinners. So, you are the relationship between relationship between society and individuals is defined under civil rights, but that also in a way defines relationship between people, between individuals and other individuals. A departure from godliness, of course, because civil rights is God's mandate. A departure from godliness, of course, is society makes a law that violates civil rights or fails to make a law that protects civil rights. So there are two ways that society or individuals can depart from godliness as it relates to their treatment of people vis-a-vis their civil rights. Failure to make laws that protect civil rights is a departure from godliness. And making laws that violate civil rights is also a departure from godliness. So I think that these are general principles that we can apply, and then how they apply to specific situations is up to individuals to understand. Of course, using the Bible and following God's guidance, following the Holy Spirit, you'll be able to understand in a specific situation what does this mean? What does it really mean? But these form general principles that we can derive from the ruling that David made in the sharing of plunder among his people. And that actually concludes the Bible study. This page simply summarizes what we learned, which we have discussed.
Yeah, it's the perspective that you have brought to it seems interesting. Well, another perspective that I want us to look at may not actually be anchored on civil rights.
Okay, that's fine.
What David did and what the Bible is trying to show us there. And I would rather focus on team efforts, teamwork. When there's a victory or whatever, when God gives us something, whether it's in what we acquire, maybe in our homes, and it goes through every facet of our lives. Some people are in the forefront, others are supporters. The men who stayed behind were to guard the equipment and the camp, the remaining things there. If they were not there, who knows what would have happened? So in as much as they were weak and couldn't continue with the moving on to go and recover the what was taken away from them, they still had usefulness. They were supporters of what was being done. The people who went may not have had this, be in a state of mind to continue, with their journey, knowing that their back is still unprotected. That's one. So it happens in everything, in our homes, in ministry. The people that shine, that are in public, in quote shine, but in public view, it's not that's not all there is to it. There are those who help them, who did other things. Imagine a situation where you have a ministry. You don't have secretaries, you don't have people that even clean the restrooms. You don't have people you don't have the choir. You don't have all the other people that may not be seen, or people that are at the background. The choir obviously is seen, but there are a lot of administrative staff, there are a lot of people that do quiet things, evangelism and all that kind of thing, that are equally important to the success that God is giving to that ministry. And those people should not be looked down upon as not being effective or not contributing. So team efforts, for me, I look at this as God trying to show us that ministry is teamwork. And when to showcase His glory, and when we see all that, there's a lot of unseen efforts and support services that go on in doing the things that we see. Again, we come to our homes, in a very common way to put it, or that we used to put it, or colloquially they used to say, behind every successful man is a woman. You see the success of the person you see that is successful, be it man or woman, because God can choose to bless a home through either party in the marriage. Now, there is support. I tell people that one thing I have seen through my journey and everything like that, especially with whether man or woman, when there is no support, when there is no appreciation, not just appreciation, if you don't have that kind of support you need from home, and it's more so for women, you find out that it's difficult for them to achieve the potentials that God has given them. That's why it's very important that the background services, let me call it, are not just background because they are not necessary, but they are equally necessary. And any victory, any gains, any achievements from what is being done should be shared equally with such people. Those who sent and those who went receive equal share. And that is the way it is in the sight of God. And that's the way, what the perspective I would like to bring out under this.
Well, that is absolutely correct. It's a perspective that goes more to individual responsibilities and recognition of individual responsibilities. That yes, there are those that are in the front line and often the victory or the accomplishment is associated with them because they are more visible. But often there are, not just often, all the time there are people behind, there are other people behind that are not in the front line that make contributions that are just as important towards the victory. And that's what David recognized here, that the men that stayed back at the base. Later on in the Bible, we see that in fact he talked about them as taking care of the supplies. The men that stayed with the supplies at the base. So he recognized that those people, and he probably gave them that task before they left. So, and he was telling the people that fought in the battle, that went to battle, that hey, yes, you went to battle, but these people that stayed back actually joined you in a different way in the battle.
Yes, and the other thing is that, when he was pointing out that God gave them the victory, it was to let those who went to the battle that they were feeling it's of their own power and might.
Yes.
But David had to make them realize that it was God that gave them the victory.
Yes.
It's not by their power, it's not by their might.
Yeah.
And that's something that is very important.
Yeah.
When we become selfless in our achievement, especially when it involves when we become selfless, then we'll be able to see, have the state of mind to see the contribution that other people made towards that success.
Yes.
And that is not by our power, not by our might. Because the battle could have gone another way.
Yes. Yes.
But it is God that gave it to them. Not because they were gallant soldiers and they fought so gallantly. And so, no. God gave it to them.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we thank you for being with us in this Bible study. And as always, we remind you that all the Bible studies we've done in the past and all the ones we'll do in the future are available through our website at bankingblessing.org. Thank you for being with us, and we pray that what you learn from our Bible study program will make a positive impact on your life and will bring you closer to God's purpose for your life. Thank you, and God bless you.
See you next time, and thank you for joining us.